Well, there's a lot of information out there about hunting public land and how to pattern deer and try to figure out how to hunt public land and so forth. But one thing that gets overlooked a lot is dealing with the hunting pressure and other hunters. You know, in addition to patterning deer, in a way you have to pattern other hunters too, because they affect the movement of deer and how deer act in certain areas of public hunting lands. And I should say also that it's not just other deer hunters, but it's other users of public land. That could be berry pickers or just, horseback riders or whatever that use public land. You also have many other different types of hunters that you have to keep in mind that are using public ground while you're deer hunting there. For example, you got squirrel hunters, maybe the coon hunters are running dogs through it at night and so forth. So these deer have a lot of pressure from human activity on public land, and some public lands are different or worse than others or whatever. But let me give you a couple of tips here about this. First of all, you have to kind of keep track of who else is using the public land, and that will influence where you put your stands and how your hunting bedding areas and feeding areas and everything like that. You just kind of have to put the whole package together of your activity plus other people's activity. Your trail cameras will give you some information. It's not uncommon at all for me when I'm on a public land road trip in another state to get pictures of other hunters on my trail cameras. Another thing to keep in mind is that the tracks that you see aren't necessarily people that are deer hunting or hunting near you. So you have to also keep that in mind. Now, here's another thing that's I think critically important, and just let me tell you a story that'll illustrate this. I shot a really nice buck on a public property in Kansas, and a neighboring landowner happened to find out that I shot the deer in there. So I was a mile and a half from the road where I could get this deer to my truck, and his property line was only about a quarter mile away. And so he says, well, I'll just run down there on a four-wheeler. And so we loaded the deer onto his four-wheeler and drove across his property and back to my truck. Well, the next year I drew a Kansas tag. I got down in there, and I got to the tree where I had killed that big buck the year before, and I looked over, and in another tree only 20 feet away, there's a tree stand. So anyway, I went ahead and hung my stand because I didn't know what to expect or, who's hunting it or whatever. I hunted that evening, went back out. In the morning, I came in, and in the parking lot is a truck. So I thought, okay, if that's the guy that's way back in there in that tree stand, I don't want to walk in on his hunt in the in the early morning darkness or right at daylight. So I waited till 9 o'clock, and then I walked on in there, and sure enough, he was in that tree, and he climbed down, and sure enough, he was a buddy of this guy, the neighboring landowner, who helped me get my deer out. And he went back in there, figured out where I had set up, and he didn't know I'd be coming back. Well, so I just said, look, there's no sense tripping over each other here. Let's work this out. And he was a nice guy about it. And in fact, what we did was we just took turns hunting back in there. He took a morning, I took an evening or whatever. It was really weird, but it was the spot was worth doing this. So anyway, after about the third day, he said, I put another tree stand up over here about 150 yards. It's in this funnel up here. And I was like, I got a camera up there, so I was thinking about moving up there myself. And he goes, well, I won't be able to hunt for the next couple days. If you want to use that stand, just use it. I'm like, okay. So anyway, the next morning, I went in and I sat in his stand, and it was kind of weird. About 9:30 in the morning, I shot a really nice buck out of his tree stand, and so that's the story of something very strange that happened. But these things can happen, and I've learned it's really, really critical to go ahead and have a rapport with other people. If you see them walking in or out, or you meet them in the parking lot, just say something to the effect that, hey, I'm hunting over here, where you at? Let's work together instead of tripping over each other. Let's not get in a situation where, we're going to be screwing up each other's hunts. it's really better to do that than to try to just have like this competition type atmosphere. And not everybody's willing to do that. Some people just won't do that. It's good for both of you if you'll do that. I've met people on these public hunting lands that have become good friends. In fact, one of my friends that I've hunted and trapped with quite a bit is a guy that I just stumbled into on a piece of public hunting property. So these are just examples of how to deal with this hunting pressure. Keep in mind that it's there. It's always going to be there, and it'll influence how you react to it. But the main thing is just try to work with people instead of against them.